2 days after I left a disappointing real estate startup in the Dominican Republic, I met a man who'd bought an eco hotel just 2 weeks earlier. He didn't ask me for my resume, he didn't ask me about my experience in hospitality, which was zero. He basically said, I need someone to run this place. And sometimes life's timing is hard to argue with. I'm Igor. 5 years ago, I left Poland and the stable, comfortable life I had there to travel the world and see what else life has to offer. In that journey, I've experienced a great amount of growth and transformation. And now I'm creating this channel to document that process and share my current whereabouts and what's up with me these days. Today, I'm at ZÂRIA, a boutique eco hotel hidden in a small fishing village in the beautiful jungle-covered province of Samana on the northeastern coast of the Dominican Republic. I used to manage this place for over a year, and this is where the greatest part and the most important part of my growth and transformation took place. In today's episode, I will go over how I ended up in this place in the first place, how I landed the job with zero experience in hospitality, the most important lessons I've learned over that period of time, and how this location was where my first contact with plant medicine took place, and how that first psilocybin ceremony led to me going to Peru for a 30 days master plant diet with 11 ayahuasca ceremonies. And in the end, I will shortly describe what my current relationship with the property and its owner and the team in here is these days. So let's get right to it. Let's pick up where I left off in the previous episode. After hitchhiking Latin America for months and going back to Europe, I found myself back in Poland in the summer of 2023. At that point, I was already running low on money and needed to find a new source of income to continue my travels and continue this new beautiful life that I've been experiencing for a couple of years already at the time. I started looking for any job in Poland that would meet a few criteria. First of all, wouldn't be the same thing that I used to be doing before I started all those travels. So no more corporate finance. And I was looking for something that would make me excited, make me feel alive, while also giving me an opportunity to keep developing one of the languages I've been learning in that period of time. Either German, which I was learning in courses for 6 years prior to leaving Poland, or Spanish, which I picked up on the Latin America hitchhiking trip. So I was sending out CVs and even lining up some interviews for a few job offers I found online. However, even though I was somewhat interested in many of the postings that I sent my resume to, none of them were making me actually really excited. And that's when I've come across a paid Instagram ad of a real estate startup in the Dominican Republic, and to cut it short, 3 weeks later I was already on an airplane to the Dominican Republic. What I found on site, however, was very different from what the advertisement, the Instagram profile promised and what I was expecting. After a couple of months of actually completing the volunteering and landing the job, I felt the need to remove myself from that environment and instead look for something else. However, I did fall in love with the place that I found myself in, El Valle, a small fishing village right off the coast of the Atlantic Ocean, with lush jungle covering mountains surrounding it. And I didn't really want to go anywhere else. The only alternative was going back to Poland. That was January 2024. So going back to Polish winter didn't really excite me that much. So I've decided I will give it a try, finding another occupation, something else to make myself busy with in here. Fate wanted it that way, that 2 days after I left that project, I met Chris, the owner of this very property, who bought it just 2 weeks earlier. 2 days, 2 weeks, same place. Talk about timing. We clicked instantly. I did go to Poland for a week at that moment just to attend my dad's retirement ceremony after 40 years of service as a firefighter. However, as soon as I got back here to the Dominican Republic, I stopped by ZΑΡΙA to say hi to Chris, met his wife, met his family on that day, and our conversation resulted in me helping him out with hosting a retreat here on the premises of the property for the following week. And after that week, he basically named me the manager. No resume, no interviews, no experience in hospitality, obviously. Just the right person at the right time. The absurdity of this whole situation sometimes still cracks me up. How a guy with education and experience in economic finances, in corporate life, all of a sudden ends up being a manager of an eco boutique hotel and retreat center somewhere in the middle of nowhere, deep in a lush jungle. And I must say, from day one, I really loved the experience. I really liked the process. Obviously, I've had some tourism experience from travelers' perspective, so a lot of these things were coming to me naturally. Just sharing stories, exchanging stories with some of the guests coming here, and obviously, this is the kind of place that attracts people who like to be close to the nature. So that part was easy, but there was obviously a lot that I needed to catch up in terms of managing a team and running operations in a Latin America country. So I think there's like 3 of the biggest insights I've learned from the whole experience. I think probably the biggest one to me was learning the importance of people over job. When I started the job, the results were the most important part to me. That was what I was focusing on, with not that much regards to how it affects the people around me. So it was a learning process to make sure that the relationships I create in here are more of a focus rather than just making sure that the money, financial charts are doing okay. That focus on goals and results, financial more than anything else, I suppose, is I guess part of my background. As I mentioned, I'm from Poland, and it's not just our country, but I would say basically anywhere in Europe, the focus and determination to make sure that you provide the best results is much more important culturally than creating the relationships and the friendships in your work environment or any environment at all. I think what I'm trying to describe, what I'm describing unconsciously, is the so-called rat race, which I've been embodying for a very long time. I suppose even after having traveled for so long, I was still in that mindset without even realizing, just because during travels I didn't really work much. I was experiencing a lot of beautiful changes, but not in a professional environment. And now managing this place in here and meeting some people in here, the owner, a friend of mine, Jared, who made me realize how the relationships between people are so much more important than the actual job, made me change that perspective on it too. And the friendships I've created in here through changing that mindset too, I'm sure will stay with me for a very long time, if not for a lifetime. So I'm very appreciative of that aspect of that lesson that I've learned in here, but it's not the only one. Another one that is very important to me is more personal. It's about my own journey in here and realizing the value that I have, that I offer. I was, I think, for a long time underappreciating the unique set of skills and abilities that I possess, and only managing this place and simply observing, seeing how capable of handling all of this without, again, with zero experience in the field prior to coming here, made me realize and appreciate myself for just how much of a go-getter I can be in the right environment if I'm doing something that I enjoy. And this was definitely a setup that I was enjoying very much. Another aspect, the third most important lesson, I think, would be, it's actually related to the second one, and it's sort of what led to me eventually leaving the operations. I've again learned something about myself, and this time it was learning that I finally don't want to be an employee anymore, if that makes much sense. Don't get me wrong, I really loved doing the whole job, and I'm still very much in love with the property. I'm wishing it nothing but the best, but in the process I've realized that maybe my actions in here and my level of effort isn't translating to enough of improvement in terms of the property, the project goals, and everything that goes behind that. So I've realized that if I manage to create an environment in which this effort of mine is going towards something that I have full impact on, rather than have to deal with limited resources and limited ability of affecting any kind of change, that I would simply feel more fulfilled, and I would feel more satisfied. So that's what led to me eventually leaving this place in April of last year, of 2025. That's not the only reason I've left, but it was one of the two. The other one being plant medicine work I've done in here in the meantime. So just when I started the manager job, at first it was actually co-managing the property with Jared, an Australian who is a very experienced facilitator in the world of plant medicine, ayahuasca, psilocybin, bufo. When we first met, and in one of our first conversations, he noticed that I've had some serious skin conditions all over my hands and arms, as well as my feet and legs. And he asked about the story behind that. After I shared the details of it, he mentioned that he may know something that could help. There was no promises whatsoever. However, he did say that in the past he used to deal with similar similar situation with his own skin. I've had other symptoms too, like I mentioned in the very first episode here on this channel. I was also dealing with some digestive issues. The whole digestive system was malfunctioning. Again, the skin changes, lots of problems with my eyes, red eyes frequently, and for all kinds of reasons, plus many allergy struggles. And Jared simply said that there may be a solution to this different than the ones I've been trying to address it with from the Western medicine. That's how I was first introduced to plant medicine. And a couple weeks after we met, he offered a private psilocybin ceremony here on the premises of the hotel. Actually, let's go to the place where that ceremony took place, to the location where it took place. And I already had experience with psilocybin, with magic mushrooms prior to that. It wasn't the same though. When I first, and up until that point, the only time that I experimented with it was in Thailand, in a beautiful setup, in a beautiful beach, Railay Beach in the province Krabi. However, that was more party-oriented, purely entertainment. And while it was an amazing experience and I've had a great time, probably one of the best nights out I've had ever, it wasn't really relatable to what I've experienced in here. When I did that ceremony with Jared, it was in a calm setup with intention and oriented towards inner work rather than entertainment. And I still struggle experiencing and describing my experiences with plant medicine, be it psilocybin or later on ayahuasca, because I don't really have the same journeys as you hear about all the time anywhere in media, social media. I don't really get a lot of visual experiences. I don't have visions. I don't have any mystical beings visiting me in them. And that was the case for my first psilocybin ceremony in here as well. But even without those, that ceremony somehow changed something in me that made me, for the first time in, at the point, like 6-7 years, believe that maybe something about my physical changes, my physical diseases, illnesses can be done. Because the whole journey of going for that hitchhiking trip and leaving Poland was basically almost completely caused by those issues. And by December 2020, I've completely abandoned hope that anything can be done about it. And now, after that small psilocybin ceremony here in ZÂRIA, that hope surfaced back again for the first time in, at the point, 3.5 years. In the following days, Jared sent me a bunch of materials to read about psilocybin, about magic mushrooms, about ayahuasca, and how it can potentially help with things like this. Plus, he even found a specific property, specific venue in Pucallpa in Peru, where he recommended I go for 30 days and do a master plant diet with the plant that the facilitators and shamans in there recommend, which I did. And while it didn't completely cure everything that I've been dealing with up until that point, it did improve my skin situation by 90%. By now it's already 100%. Right now my hands and my legs, everything is completely clear because I continued the process. However, already at that point, after that first master plant diet in the jungle and the 11 ayahuasca ceremonies I did in there, 90% of it was gone. And that was permanent too. I've already had situations where my skin situation, where my skin condition and other aspects of my messed up corporal health would improve temporarily with some Western medicine tools like antibiotics, steroids, anti-allergy pills and stuff like that, but none of it ever lasted. I would get some smoothing of my skin conditions for 2-3 weeks maybe after covering myself with antibiotic creams, but it would come back and usually come back stronger, twice as bad. So by the time I ended up in here, I just completely quit trying to deal with all of those things and was trying to simply push through the pain and suffering that I was experiencing from all of those things. And like I mentioned, when I went to Peru for that 30 days master plant diet with 11 ayahuasca ceremonies, it wasn't an easy process, not at all. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. However, at the same time, it was probably the most beautiful in results, and from time perspective, in hindsight, it was so worth it, and I would totally do everything the exact same way again. Other than healing the physical symptoms that I was dealing with up until that point, it also affected me in other ways that I wasn't really expecting it to. I think the second biggest change that took place was probably the fact that I quit weed, which I was addicted to for years leading up to that point, as part of preparation for entering a master plant diet with ayahuasca. You need to stop taking any substances, all kinds of drugs, antidepressants, drugs including weed, and you have to follow a very strict diet to enter, and then during the process even fewer options that you can eat. By the way, this is the place where the first ceremony with psilocybin with Jarrod took place. I was just basically lying down here for a couple hours, and in this beautiful natural environment with zero outside impact and noise, my first contact with this beautiful space took place. However, coming back to what I got from that very first diet in Peru, in Pucallpa, like I mentioned, the physical healing, setting myself free from weed, which up until that point I was smoking basically every day. And since I prepared for that very first diet, I had to quit 30 days before entering the jungle, and I simply never went back to it. I've also gained a lot of more clarity on who I am and what I want to do in my life. That was definitely also a factor in these later lessons I've learned that I mentioned earlier in the episode, of learning my own value and wanting to use my effort and experience in a way that will be more impactful, that will have that will translate into more visible and tangible change. So yeah, there was a lot of transformation in that very journey. and it led to me repeating the process a year later. However, I will cover that in another episode, as that wasn't part of my life here in the jungle in the Dominican Republic in ZΑΡΙA anymore. And this was the second of the reasons why I've decided to leave ZΑΡΙA, to leave Dominican Republic. First one being I wanted to try and create something of my own, while also wanted to dedicate the rest of year 2025 to more healing and addressing the whatever physical symptoms were still there after that first master plant diet at the end of 2025. I also want to quickly explain how I entered this plant medicine space, because up until doing it in here, I was actually a little bit afraid of these things. I mentioned I did experiment with mushrooms in a entertainment environment. However, I also heard about ayahuasca before, and Jared told me about all of it in here, but the perspective that I had on it was a backpacker's one. I already heard about it when hitchhiking Latin America. So when I was crossing the border from Colombia to Peru through the Amazon River, through the Amazon jungle, I stayed a couple nights in Leticia in the Colombian Amazon, where one of the hosts of couchsurfing had a small ayahuasca plant on the porch in front of his house. But at the time I thought ayahuasca is just another drug that people, kids especially, go into the jungle to get high and see weird stuff. I didn't know that it's so much more. And then I meet Jared and Chris here in the hotel, two very sharp, grounded men, fully functional, not some out of space mystics or cult members. And they were unusually clear about who they are and what they are doing, and all of that was enough to make me listen. And from there on, with Jared's guidance and support, I was able to experience the transformation that it can provide myself. Now, to wrap up the episode, I just want to give the current perspective between myself and ZΑΡΙA. As you can imagine, given that I'm literally on the premises of the hotel, the relationship is good, it's great, it's amazing. And even though I left in the April of 2025 to pursue my own goals, me and Chris and the rest of the team stayed in touch, in contact. And I've been discussing potential return in some shape or form ever since, which led to me coming back here to the Dominican Republic in December 2025 after all my work with plant medicine in Peru, to prepare myself for bringing a group here, a group of Polish travelers that I hosted here in the very hotel for 2 weeks in February of this year. And it was a great experience. Everyone loved the Caribbean vibe, the jungle, the beaches, and all the adventures I took them on. Other than being a client, one might say, to the hotel, bringing guests and stuff, I was also staying in the hotel throughout the weeks prior to that group arriving and after, all the way until now, just a day before I'm heading to Colombia. Plus, in the meantime, I think the best testimonial to my great relationships with the owner still being the case is the fact that after I landed here, coming from Peru, my first week I spent in his house as a guest, spending the Christmas and New Year's Eve period together. Plus, just now during Easter time, when him and his wife went to the US for a couple weeks to attend some business matters, he asked me to house sit and babysit his 3 kids. So as you can imagine, the relationship between us is very much in a good place and still thriving. And I don't think it's my last time here in the Dominican Republic or in ZΑΡΙA either. I'm pretty sure I'll be coming back here in the upcoming years. And like I mentioned earlier, this is a very important place to me. This is where the most important parts of my transformation and my growth happened, my healing. So I'm always very happy to see it. I'm thrilled to see it thriving day in and day out that I'm here. And if anyone ever considers coming to the Dominican Republic, be sure to check this place out, at least the very province of Samana, which is the most beautiful part of the country. And if you have the time, make sure to stop by ZΑΡΙA as well.